Hey, you've made it to the podcast Recovery Captured, hosted by me, Shannon Louise, a certified recovery coach and self-verified addict. Join me on my journey through my recovery from mind-altering substances, eating disorders, depression, and much, much more. During this podcast, you'll hear my personal experience, thoughts, and opinions, as well as my guests' stories through their own recovery. I hope that you're able to take something away from this podcast and use it as a tool to help you see that your story is picture perfect. All right, so we're back with Joe, and we're going to recap our goods, our fun facts. So, let us know what you're in recovery for, how long you've been in recovery, and give us a fun fact.
Okay. I am in recovery for heroin addiction and alcoholism. And I have been clean since June 15th of 2014. I've been trying to get sober for about a year before that. I'd been to rehab twice in that time. And the second time, it really stuck. And I've been very fortunate in being able to stay sober this whole time.
So you're coming up on 8 years?
Yep.
Is my math correct?
I think so.
Good
I
for
think
you.
so. I lose track sometimes.
I know, right? I gotta like count on my fingers. And then I can't believe it. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was very strange. Like the first few months, it like was unimaginable that I could get a year. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of go day to day, and just it just kind of adds up. And then you look back, and it's hard to believe.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't even a year. It was like 5 days. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I can't believe I haven't used in 5 days. 5 minutes. Okay, now 5 days. And now over 5 years. Huh?
Yep.
Unheard of.
I mean, it was my life before getting sober. Like, my entire life revolved around the acquisition and using of drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. It was the only driving force.
Mm-hmm. Only thing that kept me sane and kept me going was using drugs. And I loved it. At least, I think I loved it. Until it did nothing for me. In a sense.
I loved it until it started doing more damage than good.
Yeah.
And I can't even pinpoint when that was. Just the nature of denial and adjusting to the parameters you set for yourself.
Right.
Constantly crossing those lines you draw in the sand.
Right.
And then it became unsustainable. And that's when it became obvious that something had to change.
You know, when I was at the end of my using, I didn't really think of it as like unmanageable or like destructive. Until I was in recovery, it's like, oh my God, that was fucking horrible. You know, like, yes, it was unmanageable. I could hold a job, but I wasn't sober at my job. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or like relationships. Yeah, I guess I could hold a relationship, but I was a shitty person and no financial stability. You know what I mean? And then like looking back, it's like, that was a shit show. But when you're in it, I was like, I'm fine. I could do this for the rest of my life, which I thought I was going to.
Did you feel like everyone around you thought that your life was unmanageable, though?
No, I thought I hit it very well. And to my sister and my brother was oblivious to it all. He knew I like dabbled with stuff and smoked weed and drank and stuff, but he never thought of it as an issue or like substance abuse or anything until I had my intervention. And then my sister really didn't know much about it until I was sober and I was interviewed for a news article, and that's where she really found out like more about it. But other than that, like, I guess I hit it good in a way. But let's know your fun fact. You got a new fun fact.
I do. So I've had many people I've mentored in sobriety, and I finally have someone who is doing really well. They've gotten more than a year. They're coming up on almost 2 years, actually.
Wow.
And they're active in the community. They're just doing really well, and it's pretty heartening. I think that was one of the things that was really missing from my recovery program, was like feeling like I was more than willing to be generous with my time.
Yeah.
But feeling like someone was benefiting from it finally.
Yep.
With that generosity. And there's like weird ego stuff attached to that too, but also just like feeling really good about being able to help someone have what I have, because I'm generally pretty grateful, because I did not hide it well when I was at my bottom. I was homeless and unemployable, and everyone around me knew. There was no question. I mean, I think that I hit it well up until a point, and then it became so unsustainable that there was no hiding it.
Right. How long have you been mentoring this individual?
Coming up on 2 years. They came out of rehab, I think it was May of 2020, so they tried to get sober right at the start of everything shutting down, which I thought was amazing.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. Personally, I don't think I'd be able to get sober during the pandemic, because the community and fellowship really pulled it all together for me. Being isolated and like on Zoom or whatever, no, that would not do it for me. And it allowed me to build relationships and understand how to be in a relationship with another human, like friends or whatever kind of relationship. It taught me a lot, being able to rock with the fellowship and like go out to dinner after. So I envy anyone that got sober through the pandemic.
For me, that's definitely the most amazing part, is because I was so reliant on that part of it. Mm-hmm. Living in the sober house and forming those relationships, and then within the community, and all of the fellowshipping was such a huge part of how I got and stayed sober. It made me feel like I was a part of something. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely amazing that anyone, to me at least, it was amazing that anyone could get sober under those circumstances. Mm-hmm. So,
that's amazing. Good for them. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have gotten sober.
Yeah. When I was doing some Zoom meetings, I didn't think of it. Like, I didn't think of the concept of getting sober during a pandemic until I was in a meeting and there was an individual. They're like, "I'm 5 days sober." I was like, "Oh my God." And we were like in the heat of quarantine. I was like, "Oh my God." I gave him my number. I was like, "You need to keep in contact if need be, because I look up to you for doing this."
Mm-hmm. Oh, it also takes you right back to like not being able to lose that feeling of isolation when you're trying to get sober. And like, I've never felt so isolated in my life as when I was at my bottom, and going into rehab, and my self-worth was non-existent. That was a very isolating feeling, and then just getting that back incrementally through fellowshipping and through the community. But yeah, so yeah, that's my fun fact.
I like it. I dig it. That's awesome.
Getting to witness that.
Yeah. So now, are they going to mentor?
They're looking into it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They're offering of themselves.
Yep.
Which is
way to be of service.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely such a huge part of sobriety is service and generosity of time and spirit. It's one of those things that I constantly have to come back to. It was such an important part of how I got sober initially was like the humility of I don't even know if it's humility, but the feeling less self-importance than I might feel now was such a huge part of what helped me get and stay sober initially.
Okay.
Now I can think that my time is too important or it's gained more value the busier I've gotten. So it's constantly coming back to that gratitude and willingness to be generous.
So what is generosity? What does that mean to you? What is the definition in your mind?
Well, to me, it's the opposite of selfishness. In some of the 12-step literature, they talk about altruism. That's good and all, like to do things without profit motive. But I think generosity is like when I was selfish, all I cared about was the outcome for me. And now the generosity that I feel means that I'm concerned with the outcome of others. Like I don't necessarily put them above myself, but they can have equal footing.
Right.
Which is, the basis for any relationship, whether it's romantic or friendship or parent or mentor, mentee, or anything. And then just generally like a more generous feeling towards people's struggles, I think, is part of it too. Like I try to go back to...
Like you're more empathetic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was non-existent. That was non-existent for a long time.
Yeah.
It was, all interactions with human beings were transactional. They were all about what was I going to get out of it, and that was the end of it. That was absolutely the end of it. And now I try to be generous with my judgment, where not always, but if I have a bad feeling towards someone or have a resentment towards someone, I try to see where they're coming from.
Okay.
Or be generous enough to say that, I don't know what, it sounds so cliche. I don't know what they're going through, or like I try to give them the same generosity I give myself. Like, this behavior is mostly coming out of fear. So what am I afraid of? Well, chances are their behavior that I don't like or is affecting me negatively is most likely coming out of some kind of fear.
Right. And you probably have exude that behavior too. You know what I mean?
Oh, God, yeah.
I have always heard that, like, when you don't like something that someone is doing, it's because you do it and you don't like that. Or something along those lines.
Or I see the potential in myself to do it. Maybe it's not something I do anymore, but I have the potential to do it.
Right.
And I find that, that's something I'm afraid of, is like I could be that person.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, I am that person, like,
Right.
a lot of the time, too. Like, I still struggle with road rage. I'm a little bit notorious for it.
Yeah.
But
Me too. The thing is like, I'm not going to flip you off. I'm just going to give you a thumbs up or like an okay sign. Like, good fucking job. I hope you're proud of yourself. I'm going to be polite about it. I have taken the middle finger out of it, but I will pull up next to you and look at you. I will drive very slowly. I will be at your speed and I will just look at you. So yeah, it's growth. Okay? It's growth.
mm-hmm.
There's definitely a lot of change that has occurred with my road rage.
Mine has gotten significantly better over the last few years, but yeah.
But it's being compassionate with people because, just like we were saying, you've done it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're going slow because maybe they're looking for an address, you know? Or they're, I don't know, they have their blinker on because they think they're going to turn there. Or, you know what I mean? It's everything that we've done before. So it's like, we got to think of it that way of like, okay, yeah, I've been in their shoes before. I understand. But it's really hard in the heat of the moment. It's like, motherfucker, get out of my way.
Well, and for me, it's the people that drive way too aggressively. And I was so guilty of that.
Yeah.
And I try not to be anymore.
Right.
Like, I don't weave in traffic like I used to,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, I just don't I just don't I just don't like people putting me in danger.
Yep.
With their behavior.
Yep.
And it makes me angry, and then I respond by doing dangerous things.
So then you swerve and cut them off. Yeah.
But anyway, that behavior is mostly subsided, I think.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Work in progress.
It's a work in progress. It definitely is.
So where else do you see generosity? Because you've mentioned time. Generosity with your time.
Yeah, and that's certainly a huge part of any relationship, any romantic or parenting relationship, sustaining any kind of friendship. You need to be willing to be generous with your time and energy.
How do you manage the balance between, you don't want to be selfish, but being selfish is not always a bad thing. So where's that balance of like, this is my time, then I'm going to split some time for my significant other, for my child, for my friends. You know, there's a lot of time to be spent with multiple people, including yourself. And I always feel like I'm limited. Time, there's not much of it, but there's so much.
If you can find the equation,
I'll let you know.
let me know, because that's where I think that's where most of the resentment that I feel now comes in, is it stems from my inability to manage that end of things. Like, you know, I am inherently very selfish with my time. Like, I don't really want to put that energy in all the time. It's necessary though. And I mean, in recovery too, like, part of it is making yourself available, to other people that want to be in recovery. And so you have to leave time for that. And then, you know, it definitely becomes a balance. And, you know, with work right now, the job that I'm doing requires a lot of my mental energy, whereas, and a lot of my compassion and empathy. And I do believe that I have a finite amount of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have to balance that in now, and there's definitely been an adjustment. You know, my energy level has been fluctuating, and it takes time to balance it back out, and setting boundaries and being okay with things not being exactly the way I expect them to be also.
Well, okay, so we can somewhat manage our time with our significant other and stuff, or our kid or whatever. But when you've been working all day and this mental energy is just drained, and then you have this time set for your significant other or your kid or whatever, it's not always like I become snappy when like I'm drained. So it's like, yes, I'm able to spend this time with you, but I'm not my best self. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like also balancing time, and now it's balancing that mental and physical energy to match or to give someone else.
Yeah. No, I think that it's always the people closest to you that suffer the most
Yes.
in those situations. So
Absolutely.
I think that's where it's like balancing life is the most complicated, and I think that's why the people closest to you often see the worst of you, or not always the worst, but like don't see the best of you.
Right. Well, you're comfortable with them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like when a kid acts out with mom, it's because they're comfortable with them and they're able to express themselves in that way. And that's kind of like when you get home from a really long day and you just like, I need to relax, but I also need to spend time. And now I'm snappy, and now I feel bad. And you have to be really aware. You know, sometimes I just run on autopilot, but it's like I need to be aware of my surroundings and how I treat people, because it's also, I wouldn't want them to be snappy with me, especially when I need to spend time with them or have them around. So it's definitely being aware.
Yeah, I think that's where I try to offset some of that like disengagement with how I show affection, which is usually like acts of service of some kind, like doing something nice for someone, doing something thoughtful, because maybe I don't have all the energy at that moment in time, but when I do have it, I like to expend it in little thoughtful things, and it's challenging because you don't always know if that's being received, and you don't want to be like, look what I did for you,
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
So
I get that.
It takes the nonverbal communication that builds up with your loved ones, and like the knowing that my love for them is not contingent on how engaged I am in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the tricky part. Especially with a kid.
Yes.
And especially with a romantic partner.
Especially with everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not again, if you find the equation, I'll gladly take it.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
it's definitely the most challenging part of maintaining like that wellness of life that sobriety offers.
I think so. I refer to myself sometimes, and I need to change my mindset in the way that I say this, but I'm a broken wagon wheel. Okay, like you have the spokes from the hub of it, and like my spokes, like they're not connecting to the outside of the wheel. So it's like you're going down the road and it's fucking bumpy, and that's what I think of with life. Like that balance is going to be that peg connected to the hub to the wheel, where mine just stops midway with certain things. And it's like, and I've said this, it's a work in progress to have any form of balance. So with generosity, you've mentioned giving and not expecting something back. Where when a personally, and I know you probably can relate, when I was using, you mentioned like, I'm going to do something and it needs to benefit me.
Yeah.
What, how, when, so if like a listener's listening to this and they're kind of in that, it's like, what suggestion would you give to help change that mindset, that shift?
Yeah, I think for me, it started with just showing up, and even when I didn't want to, and making it more about, that's tricky because initially my recovery was very selfishly motivated.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I'm going to die if I don't do this. And then as my life started to piece back together, it became, if I don't stay sober, I'm going to lose this. And then it became, well, the way I'm going to stay sober is by giving back what was given to me. And like, you know, it's not really one step. It was just
It was gradual.
it was a gradual thing. And I think I always wanted to be generous, and I really thought that I was a lot of the time. But eventually it just got to the point where the interactions that were solely based on what's the minimum input for the maximum output, you know, it became very mathematical in that way. And I think that changed when I started to appreciate that people were showing up for me even though they didn't have to. And I had never experienced that. And I think that's one of the huge benefits of, you know, the fellowship in recovery, is that seeing the example in front of you, like people who are 25, 30 years sober still showing up and extending a hand to those that are 3 days sober. And then also like how that helps that person.
Yep.
And it becomes this like cyclical thing. Like and then also like eventually it just feels good to be generous.
Right.
And like, so, you know, while that might seem like a selfish act, I don't think it is.
Well, like
I've
said,
grappled with this.
Right. But selfishness isn't always bad. So I think there is definitely a fine line between it, and it's figuring out what that is. But I don't think seeing the joy of showing up for someone is a negative, selfish act.
No. And that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, I think that, you know, it's easy to frame those things as being selfish, but I don't think that they actually are. Like, just because you get something good out of being generous doesn't make it selfishness. It's actually the opposite of it, but it has ancillary benefits to you. It's a very interesting duality, as it were.
Right. I like giving to see that joy. It just makes me feel good. Like, you know, there's been some family trauma that recently occurred, and it's like I didn't even second guess. I'm like, I need to make food for them. You know, like, I'm gonna, day of, they need dinner, I need to bring it. And it's like, I again was not expecting anything out of it, but it's like, if I were in their shoes, I would really appreciate that, you know, with still not expecting anything, but like that joy of knowing that I was being of service to them, so they didn't have to cook a meal that night or a few days after. I made a huge batch. You know, they have kids, young kids, and with what happened, I wouldn't want to deal with anything. So, yeah,
And that's where the empathy comes in.
Right?
That previously non-existent empathy.
Right. Well, you mentioned previous. It's kind of like you thought you were empathetic towards people and you thought you were being of service to other people, but it's like that character defect of people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
I always said, because I thought it was a good thing, is like, I will always put someone first. I will keep them comfortable. I will do anything before, I'm gonna put people ahead of me. And I learned that that's a character defect. And it's like, no, I'm going to put my mask on first, so then I can therefore be of service to you and show up, right? That was something that was really hard to shift.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and that's, again, a part of being selfish, but in a positive way, in a healthy way. There's such a fine line. Were you a people pleaser?
I liked people to think that I was. But no, I don't. I think we talked about this last time too. It's like that love bomb thing. Like, convince people that I am a certain way so that I can ease back into not being that way.
Yeah.
And I think it would depend on the nature of things. Like, again, like that transactional thing. Like, if I saw it as beneficial for me to be a people pleaser in that sense, I would be.
Right.
But it's not my first inclination. Mm-hmm. My first inclination is to do as little as possible for whatever is going on.
Right.
Right. Whatever I'm hoping to get out of a situation or out of a person.
What other forms of generosity come into mind?
Yeah, I don't really focus too much on the financial generosity. I'm actually trying more and more to be less interested in money, which ends up being more generous, I think, with that kind of thing. But yeah, no, I really think that the most important things to be generous with are your time and your energy, and your compassion. This is actually, it can almost be a cop-out to be generous with resources, for me. Like,
can you elaborate?
Yeah, so like, if I'm just buying someone gifts and it's just to like buy complacency in a relationship or in whatever, and it's not thoughtful. It's not like, oh, this is something they need, or this is something that's going to help them. That is just like, here's this thing to buy some time for my lack of attention. That's where that can get dicey for me, is like, generosity with resources can almost be like a, buying penance,
Well, that goes back to the fact of you're expecting something after being generous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got to be aware.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I've definitely, and I mean like within the last few months, have been more aware with my generosity. Like a lot. And one is like cooking meals. And I've put it in my planner this year of everyone close to me, their birthdays, and it's like, I'm going to cook them a meal. I'm going to bring a meal to them. you know? Like that could be, okay, let's just say I fucking hate cooking. Like that's why, you know? I'm more aware of like sending cards, that genuine like happy birthday card, fucking thinking of you, you know? And calling people up. You always think like, oh, I gotta call them. Time passes, you forget, and then you remember, and it's like, well, it's fucking awkward now. You know what I
Oh yeah.
mean? Or like my aunt lost her dog recently, and it's like without thought, I stopped after work to get some flowers and a card and dropped it off. You know what I mean? I'm just being more aware and giving when I can at appropriate times and stuff like that. I've definitely become more aware of that because I know I haven't shown up for people, especially during the pandemic. I have not shown up for many people, and I feel guilty about it.
Yeah, I definitely could stand to be more generous in that way. That is, and that's more of a broad generosity. Like I consider my orbit pretty small. So I try to focus my generosity there, and I think that I intentionally keep my orbit small for that reason, because I don't feel like I have the energy for many more people than I already have in that inner circle. And I am not the most thoughtful person.
Yeah.
Which is why I think that I like being thoughtful is such a generous thing for me. It's because I am, and it's not, I'm not always thinking about myself, but I'm also not always thinking of others. Like there's also that in between ground. Like I'm just not being actively thinking of others.
Sometimes for me with other individuals, it's out of sight, out of mind. And I don't want to sound like an asshole when I say out of sight, out of mind, but if like me and my family and I are very close, so like that's my orbit, right? But if you're not like around me, you are out of sight, out of mind. And that doesn't sit well with me. And that's where I have realized that I need to change that mindset. Just a personal, I don't know.
No, I'm right there with you. Out of sight, out of mind is definitely a big thing.
It's such
like
a thing.
I have, one of the ones I feel guilty about is I have a friend that lives out on the West Coast, and just before the pandemic, he got sober. He had a kid, and we were pretty tight for a few years. I definitely helped him through with his struggles, but then like I just got busy, and then like time goes by, and you're like, this call, and then you make the call, and you're kind of hoping it goes to voicemail. Like that is that's something that I always do. Like I'm making calls hoping they're going to voicemail, so I can get the credit for making the call.
Oh, so true.
And I that's where like I think that's where the generosity piece is. So that is that fine line, because I would gladly, once I'm on the phone with that person, I'm happy to talk to them. But I'm also like, oh man, like I try to do most of my phone calls when I'm driving. And I also do a lot of listening to podcasts and sometimes audiobooks when I'm driving. And so like that's a lot of like my me time, and that's a lot of my time for self-reflection and thinking about the world at large, and feeling small or large within that, and all the things that go with it. And I don't necessarily want that time being taken up. But yeah, no.
But you refuse to have that conversation once you get home type of deal. So as for me, yeah.
Well, once I'm home, I don't want to be on the phone.
I don't want to do anything with anyone once I get home.
Nope.
I don't go back out. If I have to do anything after work, it has to be right after, before I get home.
Absolutely.
Like if I go to work and I come home because I have coachees and I got to meet with them, it's very, very rare to never that I will leave to go to the gym or go to the store or anything. Yeah. Once I'm home, my shoes are off, I'm home.
That's right.
Anyways.
But I also don't think that there's anything, like, I think that's being generous with yourself and your loved ones too. Like, that's the whole thing for me, is like so much of my time is spent on other people when I'm not at home, just in the nature of the work that I do now, that the idea of like going back out and putting more energy outside of what I'm doing is, yeah, I'm not leaving the house more than once a day, generally. That's my goal. I could be gone for 12 hours, but I'm not leaving more than once.
Right. Or it's like when you get home, I'm not sitting down because then I'm not getting up type of deal. When I get home, if there's dishes, I have to do dishes right then. I need to start dinner right then because it's going to be really fucking hard for me to get up and do anything.
That's right. And then it's a bag of chips for dinner.
Cereal.
Cereal, whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I like how you said generosity with yourself. I don't know what comes to mind, but I like that. And I don't know if it's just, again, being selfish. I feel like there's a term that we need to be using besides selfish, because there's that negative and positive. I feel like there's another word, and I don't know what that is.
I think people call it like self-care.
Okay.
But generosity with myself, it comes in a lot of flavors. So it's like, I am not someone that gets, like, I expend energy socially. I don't get energized by being around people all the time.
So you're an introvert?
Yeah, but I'm like an outgoing introvert, I guess. Okay. Like I need to have like that time where I'm just like recharging and not interacting. And I think that goes back to that, but also like when I think of generosity toward myself, I think of it too as like I was very tough on myself about my addiction and about my alcoholism, and I placed a lot of like blame on myself for that sort of thing. So there was like a lot of this negative self-worth and negative feelings towards myself that I'm still undoing. Like I have a lot tied up in the character defects I still have. Like and part of it is like I have kind of a short temper. I have like I need to walk away from situations and not engage sometimes, and like I'm like, oh well, my communication sucks and blah blah blah, and like, well no, I just really needed that like 5 minutes to walk away and come back to it, and not just constantly be beating myself up, not constantly being the bad guy, which is how I felt initially first in recovery. And I think that's a huge lesson in recovery, is that you're not going to get and stay sober if you're the bad guy. It's nearly impossible. Like you can't operate from that space and stay sober. Like you have to be generous enough with yourself to forgive yourself. And then if you can, and I think that's where like the whole idea of like forgiving others. If you're able to forgive others and be generous with that, then you can be generous with yourself and forgive yourself. And sometimes it's vice versa, depending on your situation. For me, it was when I was able to forgive others, I was able to forgive myself. And that was actually pretty transcendent in my ability to be in relationships. Was like accepting other people's flaws and then being able to accept my own flaws.
Yeah, when I first started working the program, I was focusing on people. Like what harm I did to them and what harm they did to me, and forgiving them and not thinking about myself and the damage that I did on myself. And then I was like, oh, okay. I'm allowed to forgive myself. I'm allowed to be kind to myself. There was definitely a shift in my mind when I realized that, oh, like I need to forgive myself. And I didn't realize that when I was working the program at first. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
Personally, for me to like forgive myself for some of the actions, like what the fuck? I was bad with certain things.
And that whole perspective shift really translates into every aspect of my life now, where, you know, I try to imagine everyone's innermost self as like their scared child. And I try to give myself that permission to like, okay, this is the scared child inside me that is looking for some sort of reprieve, and whether that comes out in the form of short temper or withdrawing or whatever, or, you know, it used to be drug use and disconnecting and, you know, oblivion, as they say. But can we actually take a break for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, we had to just take a quick break. We had text messages coming through that we had to address. And I feel like we've hit a plateau or an even ground with our topic of generosity. And I think it's the perfect time to shift gears. And I have some not so rapid questions that I'd like to ask. I was calling them rapid fire questions with my brother. He's like, these aren't it. It's like, okay, all right, so they're not so rapid fire, but
Bolt action.
yeah, right. Okay, so what makes you happy?
Oh man.
Right, you gotta think.
Well, it's, you know, it's a lot of things. I love laughing with my friends and family and just being in the moment, and I love providing for people. Providing for people makes me really happy. And I think that's partly the generosity piece, but also, you know, I guess I kind of have like a caretaker personality.
Yeah.
Where, and that's part of like how I show my care and concern and love for other people is, whether it's cooking them a meal or doing something thoughtful. But usually like cooking is a big way that I get to share that, and then that makes me pretty happy when people get to enjoy that. But yeah, now really like my happiness is mostly, it sounds really cliche, but it's really tied up in doing things for other people, and having that group of friends and family around me that I can provide for and rely on and draw upon their generosity for myself when it's needed.
What a great topic for today.
Yeah.
Okay, who's your biggest influence?
Ooh. My biggest influence. I think that's way harder than the happy question, because there's so many different avenues. You know, I will say I think my biggest source of influence is not wanting to continue the harms that I feel have been done around me. And
so your past actions are kind of
yeah,
the influence?
yeah. So any harm I've caused in the past is probably the biggest thing that influences my current actions. Because it would be really hard to narrow it down to any other one thing. I mean, there's so many people and ideas that influence me in a positive way that it would be unfair to narrow it down to one of those people. But being able to take my things that I've done or things that I'm doing and bring them to someone I trust and have that like influence of not wanting to repeat past transgressions or to grow and be and do better. Yeah.
Do better. Yeah.
Yeah. Do better. Mostly.
If you could give one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just
Be generous?
no, I would say for someone who's just getting sober,
Yeah.
it's really just going from minute to minute or day to day and putting one foot in front of the other and like asking, for me it was asking myself like what do I want? What are my expectations out of life? Do I want to continue to be on the path I was on? Because if that's the case, I'm going to take a step closer to taking a drink or getting back into the drug of choice or whatever. Or do I want to take a step away from that? And what are the steps I can take that take me away from that? Well, for me, it was taking suggestions from other people who had this type of sobriety that I wanted. I think that's really important. And you're not always going to have a good sense of that at first, but the longer you stay around, the more you can suss that out and the better sense of it you get. And, just ask questions.
Yep.
That's a big one. The I don't know is a huge one for me. That's probably my biggest piece of advice. I just always have to say I don't know. And I have to ask other people if they know. And chances are they don't know, but they might have a perspective on it that will get me closer to knowing.
I always thought I knew everything. Like what?
Do you say that in the past tense?
Yes. Yes. I don't know shit about shit. Yeah, no. No, that was, No. And I was always afraid to ask questions in school because I was ashamed to be made fun of or looked down upon. So I never asked questions. So once I got sober or like went back to college, like I must have been 3 years sober. It's like I was the teacher's pet. I was fucking asking questions up the yin yang. I'm not like, I made it this far in life not knowing anything. Let me ask these questions and I don't care what you think about me.
Yeah. That's one area where I constantly am doing work is the I don't know. Because I still think I know everything. So I'll work myself up down a line of actions where I think I know, and then I have to step back and I have to reach out and be like, I don't know.
Or do you remember?
What am I doing?
Right? Or like when you were a kid and you're looking up at like 30-year-olds and you're like, man, they got it all figured out. They know what's up. I'm a 30-year-old now and I still don't know anything. And I don't got everything figured out. Such a naive little thought.
Yep. No, I'm the age now where I was very critical of and not generous with my parents. And I'm like, oh shit, they didn't know shit. I don't know shit. They don't know shit.
Right.
Yeah.
You definitely think everyone knows a lot more than they actually know, and we're all just trying to navigate this world, and we might have better perspectives or different perspectives on things that can help guide other individuals.
I think the biggest thing too is just collaborative perspectives are always preferential to individual perspectives.
Yep. Agree. Okay. What's one affirmation that you wish you told yourself more often?
Oh, I'm enough.
Such a solid answer.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I don't even need to go any further than that. That's it. That one's the easy one.
That is the easy one. Okay, so we got our last one. What is something you want to accomplish?
Oh boy. I mean, there's so many.
Well, give me a few.
There's so many different things that I consider goals, but something I would like to accomplish would be to do one thing where I'm not and this goes back to the I'm enough, where I'm not critical of what I've done. Where I'm not my own worst critic. I think that would be an accomplishment where I can just like accept a job well done and that be enough. And that's not that's not something I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. So you complete a task or a project or something, and then thereafter you're like, is it like nitpicking it and you're just questioning yourself and second guessing yourself thereafter, like many hours?
Oh yeah.
Because that's definitely what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and like torture myself over it too.
Yeah.
Like every little decision or interaction that didn't go exactly as planned, like I will obsess over it. So I guess an accomplishment for me would be to stop obsessing over every little thing.
I think that comes in the territory, at least for me, is perfectionism.
Which will also, that perfectionism will prevent me from even starting something.
Yes. Or continuing something.
That's often the case.
Yeah. I got into my business, and first few clients, I'm sitting there and I'm about to slice their face open, and I'm like, probably shouldn't be doing this. I'm not going to do well. And it's like, why? Why am I talking to myself that way? Why am I allowing myself to talk to myself that way? This is something I want to do. Like, change that mindset, change that tone with myself. And it's like, oh, you're fucking learning. Like, that's what's happening. You know, versus I'm a fuck up. Not enough. I probably shouldn't be doing this career. What did I get myself into?
I have a fun question about your new job.
Yes, please.
Would you do mustaches also? Would you like do a permanent mustache for someone?
I would not.
Okay.
I would not, because
I'm asking for a friend, by the way. I'm not.
Not for you. You have a nice mustache. Yours is very filled in. So there's like dimension to facial hair, and I just don't think it would be ideal. And sometimes you want to shave, and like if I were doing it to like fill in areas, and like, okay, you shave and now you have like a patch of random hairs. I would do like, it's called scalp pigmentation. So if you were balding and you had, say, a buzz cut, I would do like pointillism, and it would fill in to look like you have a buzz cut all over.
Okay.
It's pretty interesting.
All right.
Yeah. It's a good question. I have been asked if I would do arm hair.
Oh.
It was on a female too. And I was like, ma'am, you have very nice arms and they're hairless. I would keep it that way. And sometimes certain things are just a trend, and I don't want to do trends either.
No.
Like some women laminate their eyebrows up. Like, I would never microblade hair strokes straight up throughout the whole brow, because that's a trend and that's going to change. You know, you kind of have to make that own judgment.
Yeah.
But good question.
Well, and my main reason for asking is it's like you have such a permanent impact on someone in a short period of time.
Yeah, see why I question myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary.
It plays into the whole, am I enough? Am I doing a good job?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Questioning my career choice. Absolutely. I'm definitely changing someone's face.
Yeah.
And it's permanent. Luckily, it will fade, and there are options to get it taken off, but it's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to look good.
Well, I'm glad that my eyebrows are so luxurious.
Yeah, you got nice eyebrows. You got a nice arch. I do check out everyone's eyebrows now. And I'm like, ooh, I could fill those in. I'm excited to start doing men, too. My mentor at the shop, he said I could do his, which I think is dope.
Yeah.
It looks super natural when you do microblading.
Okay. Are yours done?
Yes. Do you see?
Oh, cool.
You see how those hair strokes don't move?
Yeah.
So I got my eyebrow. So huge insecurity of mine growing up until a year ago was not having eyebrows. They're very light, very sparse, just non-existent. And I finally got the courage to get them tattooed. And it literally changed everything. Changed the perspective, the way I look at myself, the way I feel. I can take my makeup off and still have dimension to my face and have structure, where before I looked very bland. And it changed my life so much so that now it's my career.
That's so cool.
Like I didn't even go to my second appointment, which was, I must have been a month out from having my first procedure, and I went to a class and got certified. Like, that's how fast things moved.
Wow.
And I spent a lot of money on both things, getting my eyebrows done and going to the course, and it was the greatest choice I've ever made.
That's awesome.
So I hope one day to be able to, I cried right after she showed me, and I was just bawling my ass out. She's like, I hope this is a good cry. I was like, you have no idea what you just did to me. Yeah, so it's like, I want to make someone cry like a little bitch on my tattoo chair and change them.
That's awesome.
Great feeling.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming over and doing another episode and being of service to others listening to this podcast. And I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, we out.